Welcome to episode 256 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I chat with Basketball Australia's chairman, Ned Coten, about hoops and the logistics of hosting a basketball game in a football stadium.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who looks up to Shaquille O'Neal because he's so darn tall, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan, and you are listening to Sports Geek. Thank you very much for listening. You are doing so either via your favourite podcast app. It might be Apple. It might be Google. It might be my favourite one, Pocket Cast, or it could be on Sports Geek website, sportsgeekhq.com, where you can find all the links to this episode and all the backlog of all episodes. As always, you can contact me via email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com, or via Twitter @Sean Callanan, or as my guest Ned Coten suggests, you can even text me. If you've got my mobile number, send me a text, or maybe reach out to me on Signal. Who's using Signal because it provides more privacy. Catching a bit of buzz this week on the internet that more sports orgs are using it because they don't want to be tracked when they are tampering with salary and talking to players that they shouldn't be talking to. So if you want a private conversation, use the encrypted app Signal. I did set it up this week and did notice a few friendly faces that have already set it up. Don't know what you're trying to hide, but I'm not trying to hide anything. But yeah, reach out to me on Signal. Before I jump into my chat with Ned Coten, the chair of Basketball Australia, and talk to him about basketball overall in this part of the world, but then also the big game that they hosted at Marvel Stadium, where 50,000 people attended a basketball match with the basketball court in the middle of a football stadium, where Team USA took on the Australian national team, the Boomers, owned a 2-game series. So very successful. I'm really looking forward to the chat. Before I do, I just want to ask, have you checked out our Patreon campaign? Just go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon and to support these efforts, the efforts of putting out these podcasts, this one, our regular Tuesday episode, an interview with someone in the sports business industry, sharing their insights, and our new series that comes out on Fridays, the Sports Geek Q&A, the shorter, sharper, where I answer your questions. The Sports Geek Patreon helps support those efforts. So if you're finding value from these podcasts or from our newsletters, Sports Geek News that comes out each week and recaps the articles that I've been reading, I'd love your support. You can do that as a personal supporter. It's only $4 a month. Or if you're a brand or a startup in the space that want to reach the Sports Geek audience, there are options in there for you. Please check out the show notes, sportsgeekhq.com/256 for this episode, to see some of the great supporters that have already supported me and supported the Patreon campaign. So go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Thank you very much to Dwayne, who signed up last week. Now, on to my guest, the chair of Basketball Australia, Ned Coten. Very happy to be joined by a good friend of mine, Ned Coten, long-time sports administrator and chair of Basketball Australia. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much, Sean. It's great to be here and, excited to have a chat about a few things today.
Yes, we'll probably be heckled by the Tuesday morning basketball crew for our non-attendance for most of this year. So shout out to those guys.
Have you been there less or me?
I think we're both equally poor in our attendance.
Right,
so
okay.
We've got to get out there back on the court. So obviously basketball is a big theme in your life. Give the listeners a bit of a background of how you got into the world of sport.
I grew up in a small country town in Western Australia. I played my first game of basketball on a rainy Friday night on a bitumen basketball court with a rubber basketball with the fibres coming through it. It was probably about 5 years old. When I was about 12 years old, growing up in the country, I often say to people I had a basketball, a football, a cricket bat, a tennis racket and a bike. And that was my entertainment. There was obviously no I guess what we refer to today as technology, and so we had to make our own entertainment, and I did it through sport, and it's a theme that I feel very fortunate now to have had in my early years, and grew from there. So I'm 6'8", so I'm not short, and I was always a big kid, and so. I played footy, as in Aussie rules. I played basketball, pretty much all sports. And basketball and Aussie rules were the two that sort of came through. And I was fortunate enough at the end of my Year 12 studies to get a call from Adrian Hurley, who was at the time the coach or the head coach of the AIS, and I spent 2 years at the AIS on a scholarship, and that was really formative in my sort of in those early sort of, I guess, late teenage years, but early basketball years. And from there, I came back to Perth. I actually did a teaching degree and never taught. And then a friend of mine from the AIS, Charlie Fancutt, had teamed up with Pat Cash and Paul McNamee to start the Hopman Cup in Perth. Yep. And Charlie was looking for a few mates to help, and I was one of the mates. And so I got hauled in and spent a year on the Hopman Cup, the first Hopman Cup in Perth. Okay. And at the end of that year, Charlie decided that he wanted to get into basketball. And so Charlie and I had 25%, and the Kalgoorlie Basketball Association had 50% of the Kalgoorlie Giants, which was a start-up team in the State Basketball League in WA. And so that was the start of my administrative career in basketball. Did that. The team's still going. They've won a couple of championships, which I'm very proud of. And in fact, one of the players we recruited still lives in Kalgoorlie. Okay. An American guy called Doc Earl. So if you're out there, Doc, hope you're going well. And then I went into administration with the Wildcats. I then came to Melbourne, where I now live. Worked on an NBL team, Victoria Titans, and then sort of left sport and basketball, got into some other businesses, and I since then have been a volunteer in the sport. So I was actually on the board of the WNBL and Basketball WA when I was in Perth. Yep. I came here and was on the Basketball Victoria board and joined Basketball Australia about 6 years ago, and everybody stepped back from the chair role 3 years ago, and I was left standing. So I've been in that role for about 3 years. And so basketball in Australia in a really healthy spot. So what's the remit for Basketball Australia? Because that has changed over the 6 years you've been at Basketball Australia. What's the remit now? Yeah, look, it's a really great question, Sean, and it's evolving at the moment. Is probably the easiest way or the best way to describe it. I think and we're just going through this process at the moment, but 4 years ago we had a strategic plan from 2016 until 2020 to take us basically through the sort of Olympic periods. It's traditionally how NSOs such as the national sporting organisations such as Basketball Australia have operated. And if you think back to 2016 in Australian basketball, it was a time when the NBL was on its knees. The board of Basketball Australia was, one of the questions I guess we asked was, will there be an NBL? The NBL had broken away from Basketball Australia or had separated from basketball, in a good way, but was really struggling. Larry Kesselman was a team owner at that stage. The other owners convinced Larry to sort of invest in the league and take it over. And, we now see the incredible job that Larry's done in rebuilding that league. So that's been a fundamental change to the environment in Australian basketball. We have also seen a number of other changes in that Australian players now are getting really, high-profile, roles in the NBA, the WNBA in Europe. And so I think that a lot of Australian kids have always that there's been an undercurrent of support for basketball, and a lot of that is actually for the NBA. And so if you ask a kid on the street, do you follow basketball? Yes. Who's your favourite player? Yep. LeBron, Steph Curry, they're NBA players. But I think Larry's done a great job of really invigorating the NBL, and the women's NBL operates under Basketball Australia, and I think we're now doing a reasonable job of building that league as well. And so, as you say, Sean, the whole infrastructure and the whole profile of the sport has lifted, and it's been a bit of a perfect storm. A lot of different things have happened, and I'm a very strong believer that the success that we're experiencing at the moment is based on the last 30, 40, 50 years of grassroots basketball in this country. So the volunteer coaches in country stadiums or country courts like the one I grew up on, and I still remember my coach, John Stone, was a local school teacher. He was very influential in my life and my basketball career. And he was a volunteer. He just came out, he coached, he refereed, he really did an incredible job. And there were people like that all over the country, and there have been for the last at least 50 years in Australia. And here in Victoria, where I now live, people like Betty Watson and Lindsay Gaze and many, many thousands of others have just over the years just been constantly involved in the sport. And so you've now got this massive base of participants, of people that love the game and have learned the game the right way. And so when you have that massive base over a 40 or 50 year period, we now have reached that level where there's so many athletes, so many administrators, so many referees. It's not just players on the world stage; it's others as well. And so that's a result of 50 years of work, not 5 years of work.
No, it's not just the golden generation of these guys that have made the NBA. They're doing it on the shoulders of the other players that have gone before them, that made the small breaks. The Luke Longleys and those kind of things, being first draft picks and those kind of things, and those early 80s and 90s, building on that success of the NBL. It's amazing because it is coming from Matthew Dellavedova playing in Maryborough to playing in the NBA, and so it's a good problem to have for basketball, to be going, how do we connect these kids with these guys? It's very similar to what FFA faces with the Socceroos. Like, you've got these talented guys all over the world, and I think Jeremy and Larry, the guys at the NBL, are doing a good job of connecting the NBL, the NBA guys, and the whole basketball scene to be aspirational. If I am playing, I can end up at the NBA. There's a pathway, which is the bread and butter of Basketball Australia, but then this entertainment product that we've got these superstars that are playing in the biggest league in the world. Yeah,
look, that's exactly right. And, as you and me were sort of joking at the start, we go down to MSAC in Melbourne on a Tuesday morning from 7 till 8, and anyone listening who's a half-decent player is welcome to join us. At that time, we're all old hacks, but we've got plenty of back chat, and it's a lot of fun. But what we see down there is we're on a half court, and all the courts are full. And they're full with kids that are playing, with coaches running either development programs or one-on-ones. There's people down there that have that are really doing an incredible job to build the sport. And we see that all over the country. At 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, there's kids on basketball courts. And when I was a kid, that didn't happen. And so the world has really changed, as you've said. And I think that it's a combination of the NBL, the WNBL, the NBA, the Women's NBA, what's happening in Europe, and the sport globally is really booming. It's really going well. I would argue that the NBA, probably along with Premier League soccer, is the best run and operated and certainly the most visible league in the world. And so we're a recipient of, or a beneficiary of that, that excellence that they're doing. And we have, in fact, just before getting on this chat with you, I was just talking to someone out of NBA Asia who we've got a very close relationship with. We have a very close relationship with the NBA in the US. The NBA have invested in the Australian Institute of Sport in our Global Centre of Excellence. So there's an NBA Global Centre of Excellence in Canberra, run in conjunction with the AIS program, where athletes from all over the world really come and develop, because Australia is seen as such a stronghold of development of talent, of young talent. And so I think that's an incredible change. So, to go back to that sort of strategic plan, that the foundation on which we're standing is totally different to just 4 years ago. And that's a fantastic spot to be in. And so what we have is we've got higher level issues now that we've got, before we worried about, will we have a league, will we be able to play? And now thinking, well, how do we cope with this demand? The biggest issue that the sport faces in Australia is a lack of facilities. We don't have enough facilities to cater for, not future demand, current demand. So there's right at the moment in Victoria, we need over 100 courts to cater for existing demand, in addition to what we've already got. And those courts are being filled from 7 in the morning on a weekend till 10 at night, Saturday, Sunday, and every night of the week. And some of those are 16 court facilities. So
it's very similar to chatting with Peter Filopoulos at Football Victoria. Like, they're facing the same thing of pitches. They need more pitches, you need more courts. It's a little bit of, talking to Dino Di Pierdomenico about grassroots sport around the world. This is the part of the unique part of Australia, is that there's strong participation. A lot of people want, and facilities are the piece to unlock. How much of your time is lobbying governments and talking to them about unlocking these facilities? Because it's, the benefits of having the kids on courts and playing sport and those kind of things is so high. How much are you playing that politic game?
Look, frankly, not enough.
Yep.
I think what we have, I think it's really importantly, it's a role for state and territories, and I think the state and territory organisations do it really well, because invariably that initial funding or base for a new facility will come from a local association or a group of people at a local level influencing their local council and then the state government. We are in the process of developing a national facilities plan, which our state and territories have made a significant contribution to. And a number of the state and territories are doing an incredibly good job of lobbying government, engaging, and data is a really critical part of that. This would be, no news to you, Sean. But
no, it's exactly what I was chatting with Dino. It's like having understanding of who's playing and they're flowing through these stadiums. Like a lot of people look at the world of sport and sports business, at the big cathedrals of the MCG and these big stadiums, and what is it like? Oh, look at how amazing it is to get 100,000 people. But when you look at grassroots, there's hundreds of thousands of people going through all of these stadiums. And so that data piece and how you commercialise that is where the new frontier of sport is.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think one of the challenges that our sport has faced, and I think to Larry's credit, he's really, he's taken a commercial approach to basketball. He's a business guy, not a basketball guy. And that's a great thing because he brings a business perspective. And often in sport, you have in business, you're primarily concerned about money. At the end of the day, it's great to have a business that you enjoy being part of, but you're there to make money. In sport, it's different. You want to make a surplus. You don't want to lose money, but you're there because you love it and you've got an emotional connection to it. And that's a great thing because it brings the passion of sport. But it can be a negative because you focus on the sport at the expense of the business.
Yeah.
And my observation of sport generally and Australian sport and specifically basketball is for a long time we've focused on the emotional side. And we've done a reasonable job of being business people and getting into it. But I think that's the area that we need to really focus on going forward, and to use that data and insight into the way in which we attract people to the game, or continue to attract people, how we develop people, how we build facilities, how we interact, how we ensure that people enjoy the game. And my personal reason for being involved is that I'm currently the chairman of Basketball Australia, which is a great honour for me personally. Coming from a little country town to that role I feel incredibly humbled by that. But I really don't care if I'm the chairman or I'm the guy wiping the floor. I just want the sport to be better.
Yeah.
And so I think if we are able to garner the sort of the different parts and the different skill sets of people that are in the sport, because now we've got so many parents who are in positions of power in either politics or business or media or wherever, whose kids play and love the game.
Yeah.
And again, when I was growing up, there was no one like that.
Yeah.
So it's the landscape's totally changed, and I think that we have an opportunity and an obligation now to really make sure that we think strategically about how the sport can grow. I feel very passionately that sport is a real enabler of a better life for Australians as well.
Yep.
The health and fitness from a physical perspective, as well as an emotional perspective, I think can make a big dent in the it's a preventative health measure. So as opposed to we know that the health budget's always rising because we're dealing with many of the issues that our lifestyle brings. Sport can help fix that. And so I think it's a great investment, and we have a great opportunity to take advantage of that. Yeah,
the real challenge is the piece of how much volunteers are a big part of grassroots sports. I love when I talk to Isaac Jury from Tidy HQ. Like, he talks about it as like, you're a volunteer, you leave work, you're in your collar and suit and tie, and then you're going to a committee meeting to run your club, and the emotion of the passion of sport kicks in, and you forget all of the things like P&L and governance and all these types of things that you do in your regular job, because the passion of, wouldn't it be great if our club won the title, or wouldn't it be great if we got more, and you get so caught up in the sport, which is why you love it, that sometimes that business piece falls away. And so that's the tough bit from a governing body point of view, to say, there is this opportunity here. How do you provide systems and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and I think, we also, human nature is such that it's sometimes difficult to get away from the emotion as well. And so one of the challenges, I think, for us and our board and organisation is to remain focused on the things that are really critical. And, as with anything when you're a volunteer, the volunteer system within sport in Australia is incredible and it's unique in the world.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons, we often, and in fact, I have conversations all the time with visitors. In fact, we had just last week, we had the French Basketball Federation came to Australia, who you might recall in the men's FIBA World Cup recently, the French team beat us. We beat them, and then they beat us in the semi-final. Which was in the gold medal game or the bronze medal game, which was really disappointing. But they're coming to us. How do we get better? And particularly Americans, people from the US and Canada, whose system is totally different. So that system is based on high school and college school environment where everybody's paid. Yeah. In Australia, no one's paid, and it's very difficult for people to get their heads around that. And it's an incredible asset that we have, and I think Australians should be really proud of the way they embrace this volunteer, community spirit around. It's not just basketball; it's every sport in Australia,
pretty much. Yeah.
And it's it's just an incredible asset to us.
So one of the things I did want to touch base and talk to you about was a rather large project that was taken on board in the last 18 months and finally came to fruition this year, which was the Team USA versus the Boomers games at Marvel Stadium. For those who don't know, Marvel Stadium is a football stadium that holds 50,000 people. Take us through, I guess, from your point of view, seeing there at the board and when that idea got thrown up and some of those initial negotiations of, hey guys, we want to play a basketball game in the middle of a football stadium.
Yeah, look, it's you could literally write a book about this story, Sean. It's been a long journey. It's actually been about 4 years.
Yep.
So the foundation of the idea came about for those that are sort of basketball fans, I guess, might remember that Australia played New Zealand to qualify for the Rio Olympics in 2000 and I guess it must have been 2015.
Yep.
Or,
14 or 15?
15. I think it was 15 because Rio was 2016. So 2015 at Rod Laver Arena. We sold that game out. That was the idea of Anthony Moore, who was the CEO of Basketball Australia at the time, and had this vision to sell out that venue and to really bring basketball back to the people. And I think that game in itself was a real foundational element of our last 3 or 4 years of growth, not just within BA but also the NBL. It sort of set.
So everything was on the uptick and up and to the right. If you're looking at startup charts, that's right. Where it was for basketball.
Yeah, I think so. And there was, it was just great. We won that game. It wasn't a fait accompli that we won. We had Andrew Bogut was injured. He was a critical player. Paddy Mills was not going to play at one point, and there was a whole story behind that. And Paddy came through and did an incredible job. Bogut was unbelievable. He was literally lying on his back, just about unable to walk before the games, and then got out and did an amazing job. So we won those games, and that formed the foundation of an idea that we could get Team USA to come to Australia because they and the thinking at the time was that the World Cup, the one we've just had, was going to be in China, and Australia and Melbourne is in the same time zone. And so we felt that it would be good for them as a preparation to come to Australia. One of the reasons we thought that is Australia is a very safe and easy place for people to come. We understand sport. People come out to see sport. We run events well. We knew that we would do, we knew that we would do a good job of the event. But we couldn't underwrite it ourselves. So Basketball Australia wasn't in a position to do it. It ultimately turned out to be a sort of a $26 million undertaking. There was obviously a rights fee payable to the US. And what happens with Basketball Australia's equivalent in the US, and there are a number of basketball organisations in the US, but the equivalent is Basketball USA.
Yep.
So while the NBA runs the professional side, you've got the NCAA running the college system, and a number of other organisations in high school and sort
they're
of
effectively the federation in the US.
Correct, that's exactly right. And so what they do is they sell their commercial rights to the NBA because the NBA are clearly very good at that commercial area. And because of the other infrastructure in the US, their remit really is very focused around the national teams.
Yep.
And so we engaged with a company called TEG to undertake the contract on our behalf and underwrite it. So TEG have brought out a number of football or soccer teams to Australia, concerts, wrestling, etc. They're great event promoters and do a great job. So the contract for the game was actually between TEG and the NBA, despite the fact that the two teams were playing. And look, it's fair to say over the period from 2015 until, I'm sitting here with you now in 2019, that we've learnt a lot.
Yep.
I think that what you saw at the event at Marvel Stadium was incredible. We obviously had some issues in the lead up to that. There were issues with the seating. There were issues with a number of the American players that we thought were going to come out didn't end up coming out.
Yep.
Ben Simmons was going to come and then made a decision not to ultimately, or was unable to come.
And these were completely unrelated to your game,
yeah,
really.
Look, it's very difficult to describe just how difficult it is to run these events. It was a really big thing. It's not a small, it's the biggest basketball game that Australia's ever seen by a multiple of 2 or 3. So when you do big things, you have big problems.
Yep.
And believe me, we had big problems.
Yeah.
And so the sorts of things were, first of all, convincing the US that they should come here.
Yeah.
And that took a year. So we did a fantastic sort of presentation deck. Anthony went to the US, presented it to Basketball USA.
And effectively said, this is where your training camp can be before the World Cup. You get 2, warm-up matches against quality opposition, big crowd. Like that was the pitch to them to say it's easier to do it here than be trying to go over to Japan earlier and that kind of China earlier.
Yeah, that's right, and it was, and that was literally the pitch. Australia, they probably could have made more money by going somewhere else, but the environment wouldn't have been the same, and so we had to sell Australia on the benefits that we had and we saw, and that was the first part. So literally just getting the US to come here was a coup in and of itself.
Yep.
Deciding to go to a football stadium, as in an Australian rules football stadium, and put a court in the middle was, again, another massive gamble, a big project, something that really took 3 years to pull together. The ticketing.
But it's almost the economics of the deal. Like if it's $26 million, you can't put it in Rod Laver Arena.
Well, that was exactly the point. The US really determined that unless the money was good enough, that it wasn't worth their while to do it, and we couldn't make you couldn't generate the revenue from say Rod Laver, 16,000 seats to do that, and so these are the economics of these kind of events, and they're difficult things to explain to people as well. You can't go out and sort of sell that message, and so I think that. We were incredibly excited to get the US to come. At the time that we promoted the event, all of those players were in the squad to come, and unfortunately decided for various reasons ultimately not to come, and then not to play in the World Cup in China. And from our perspective, not having Ben here was obviously disappointing for a lot of fans. People were looking forward to seeing that. But I think, as we were saying just before we went on air, they were 2 incredible events. There were absolutely some issues. Some of the seats. So
that's the thing.
Ideal.
So for people who didn't know, 50,000 people twice. So effectively 100,000 people came over the 2 games. It was the first game was the Thursday, and the second game was on the Saturday.
That's right.
So I was lucky enough to go to this the Saturday game. I am a current subscriber to your Notes from the Chair. So you send out a regular newsletter sort of detailing some of that stuff. That first game, Team USA won. There were, trying to run an event like that is, like you said, is always going to have teething problems, especially when you have Russell Crowe deciding to tweet about what he's looking at. Like what was that 24 hours, 36 hours after the first one Because, again, the easiest thing for the media to do is to jump on a few tweets, make a big blow-up.
Yeah,
but you had 50,000 people there that saw it.
It's right. And unfortunately, people tend to grab onto a couple of things. So they're and I can't remember the exact number of complaints, but it was very, it was less than 100.
Yep.
So it was very, and I'm sure they were valid, so I'm not sort of trying to downplay that, but it was a minimal amount of criticism got all the attention instead of the game. And that's the way the world is, unfortunately.
But it is quite, like everyone saw the scale, they saw the artist renderings, they know the dimensions of a basketball court, they know the dimensions of a football field. Like myself, I've been lucky enough to go to WrestleMania at Levi Stadium, right? And I couldn't see anything because I was sitting in the stands, but I wasn't there to be able to see and hear the squeaks of the WWE. I was there for the theatre and being part of the bigger piece.
Look, I think that's right, and it's I think we can it's certainly for me it's very simple to see it that way, and I made a point of trying to go around to as many people as I could on the Thursday night. People I knew in the crowd. How's it going? What do you think? And the feedback to me at the time was excellent. It was really good, and so it was just it's one of those problems you have when you try to do something great. And something big, and it's not. If you're not having any problems, you're probably not trying hard enough. And so, the 36 hours afterwards was really difficult. We did a lot of, we had a meeting that night after the game. We had sort of some discussions the following morning about things that we needed to do to make the whole experience better. Not just the seats. There wasn't much we could do about the seats, but to make the experience better. What we didn't do was tell the coach he had to win, but he came through with that anyway. So that was pretty handy, and I think ultimately that winning was was just incredible. So the people were there, witnessed history, the first time Australia's beaten the US, and so that certainly made things better. One of my favourite sayings is that success covers a multitude of sins, and certainly that made it a better experience for a lot of people, I think. But it was probably more so the sort of the 6 weeks leading up to the event that was the really difficult part for us. We had incredibly difficult negotiations. There was a lot of pressure on us from a whole range of people, both commercially, in terms of our key stakeholders. Obviously, the playing group was trying to prepare for a World Cup and had the pressure of performing in these two games. So there was a whole lot of stuff thrown in, and we, Basketball Australia, and certainly myself and our now CEO Gerald Rector were right in the middle of that, and that was that's a time in my life I'll never forget. It was incredible. The pressure was probably by magnitude of 2 or 3 the most I've ever experienced in terms of anything I've ever done. And I've been in some interesting, I've been in a number of businesses and other things, and it was so the pressure cooker was on and the lid was closed, and we were really going for it.
Well, pretty much it, because you had the expectations of 100,000 customers in the stadium, but then the eyes of the basketball world and the basketball community in Australia saying, "Get this right, guys!" And to be, I was really lucky and privileged to be at that second game, and as someone who watched the feedback and read all the press and everything, the second game you could see the tweaks, and it's amazing, some of the tweaks, and then you also saw some of the restrictions of what you had to do because it was a FIBA game and there were certain entertainment things you couldn't do. So you couldn't be having music, the entertainment product that they're used to at the NBL, NBA, because you were running the FIBA program. And so those kind of things that people didn't realise that they are, this is the type of game we're running, so we've got to run with those rules. Yeah,
really interesting. I mean, little things that people wouldn't know. It was actually, amazingly, in Australia, it was a USA home game.
Yep.
So that's how it was promoted. That's how it was run from a technical perspective, and so the court announcer was American.
Yep.
That was part of the contractual obligation that we had. So little things like that were things that we just had to work around and deal with, I guess. But I think that what it taught us was that these things are possible. It taught us that we have still got a long way to go in terms of getting this exactly right. It taught us that the ecosystem in Australia can support this, but we need to work more closely together in the future to enable these kind of activities and events to happen. And as we saw in the FIBA World Cup in China, the Australian men's team, the Boomers, and obviously the Opals have performed well over a number of years, are absolutely amongst the best in the world. There's no question. And but for, a few seconds at the end of our semi-final game, we might have been playing for a gold medal for the first time.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was listening to Bill Simmons' new Book of Basketball podcast. He was talking to Steve Kerr, and Steve Kerr pretty much said that, yeah, we should have beaten Spain in that game. And it's like, it's just a little bit of my heart just broke again because they fought so well. But, fourth, which is equal best finish for Australian men's team. Again, just hopefully sets them up for the Olympics again and the fortitude of going back again. But it was interesting hearing Steve Kerr, who was an assistant coach in the USA team, saying, Bogut and that were running, backdoor plays that they've been running since 2014.
Yeah.
And the USA team had been rolling out their plays like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Right. And so that connectivity and connection that the players have is so beneficial for the teams that have been together for a long time.
Yeah, look, it really is. And, and ultimately, Spain, a lot of the European teams are like that. They really, I think there's incredible passion in Australia amongst our players, men, women, our wheelchair teams, our junior teams, to play for the country. And so I know that group of players was very passionate and have been for a long time about winning a medal and winning a gold medal. That was absolutely their aim. And I was... probably a little unsure as we went there whether or not that was possible. But in seeing the first few games, I knew that it was absolutely possible that we could have won, and there was no question we could have. I mean, anyone watching the game as you did, Sean, could see that and sometimes things just roll. Something rolls the wrong way and you miss it. But we were absolutely capable of doing it. I think the really the gut wrenching thing is that the USA is obviously the marker, and their team was obviously not the best team that they can put on the floor, and I think in Tokyo 2020 we're going to see maybe not the very best, but pretty close to it. All of the NBA guys are all saying, look, I'm going to come out and we're going to show the world something. I think we're still capable of beating them, but it's going to be hard.
But that's great. But that is also great for basketball that they got their whack again. And, we've already seen people like Lillard and Curry all put their hand up and say, I'll be there for the Olympics. Which it's a little bit Dream Team-esque. We're going to have these cycles. But I think it's going to be good for basketball. It's going to make
it will be, and I think there's no question that we can, we can still perform there. Our guys are so passionate. We've got such incredible players, and the heart that they play with is just, is really something to, to behold. And so, the whole experience at the World Cup was really interesting. We went there. It was held in China for the first time. It was held across 8 different cities in China, so logistically that was difficult.
Yeah.
I think that FIBA did our world body did a great job of promoting the event. The opening ceremony and other elements were incredibly good. It was difficult to move between cities, so we had sort of 4 moves in a period of play a game, move the next day, and then play the next night. That's tough. And
so it was almost like an NBA road trip.
Yeah, very much so. And over 2 weeks, and after it was a 7-week campaign by the time they sort of got back home again. And look, it was the same for all teams, but I think that it was just difficult. But I thought the event was good. I think that we've now got that core group who can really take the next step, and I know that they're all excited to do that. So, along with the women, of course, in Tokyo, we'll have hopefully a 3-on-3 team. Our women's 3-on-3 have qualified for the Tokyo qualifiers to get into that tournament. Hopefully our rollers and gliders will qualify for the Paralympics. So, look. The future's good, but there's a lot of work in front of us.
And so is it being an Olympic year? Is that all the focus for BA over the next 12 months?
Oh, look, it certainly is a focus. There's no question about that. You can't, that's something that, athletes look forward to. But we still have to run the business. Kids still want to play. We still run national championships. We still have integrity, matters to address. We've got to coach, train the, referees, train the coaches, make sure that we have development camps, make sure that clearances get processed, all of those things. So business must go on as normal. And I think that, people often don't probably just don't comprehend the volume of responsibility that any sport has, and basketball is no exception. There's just so much work that happens behind the scene, and putting a national team on the floor is an incredibly difficult undertaking, but it's just one part of a much broader remit. And so I think now one of the sort of the discussions we're having more broadly through the sport is how do we, what is the next 10 years like, and how do we work more closely together to actually ensure that each different part of the sport does their part well, and contributes to success at a national level, at a state and territory level, and at a local level. And I think that's for any organisation that is a really good undertaking and a difficult thing to achieve because everyone has different perspectives.
Yep.
I think within the sport there's great alignment around where we want to get to. What we're probably not quite clear on yet is just exactly how to get there. And I think that's that's the next challenge that we need to take on, to try and make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of the the sort of the classic thing. If you walk around an organisation, you should be able to ask each person what the organisation does, and everyone should say the same thing.
Yeah.
And probably, to be fair at the moment, I think the answers would be different, and we need to fix that, and that's really a focus for us.
But you really want to make sure, sort of talking back to where we started the conversation, is that where we are now, where basketball is now, is the current base. And so what, right. And what does the next level look like? If we've got, 10, 15 Australians in the NBA and the same amount in the WNBA, what does it look like in 10, 20 years? Those kind of things, and how can events like the USA Boomers game be built upon? What do you do it next time? All of those kind of things.
Yeah, look, that's really really true, Sean, and I think that we're at a new sort of foundational point for the sport. If you look at some of the things just that have happened in the last few months, within the NBL, LaMelo Ball comes out and gets over 1 million views on Facebook of his game. There's 100 scouts at their pre-season game in the US just to come out and watch him. There's people, the focus on Australian basketball now is incredible. The development system, the way in which the leagues are operating, all of the things that are being done here. So we do have a great opportunity to really take advantage of those things. And it's like the Roman Empire. When it's going well, you want to sort of go, okay, well, how do we not implode here? How do we make sure we keep going up and up? And for those that have been around the sport for a while, will probably remember that the 80s, when the sport really took off in Australia, and again, to me, that was a perfect storm of opportunity. The NBA was going well.
Yep.
Sporting. Particularly shoe manufacturers were promoting basketball gear as fashion, and so all the billboards and TV ads had basketball gear being promoted. Separately to basketball, it was about fashion, not basketball, but basketball was a beneficiary. There was private ownership in the NBL. The national leagues in both the men and women really started to take hold. Parents started to realise that basketball was a great sport for their kids. A lot of things came together at the same time.
Yeah.
We got a bit too big for our boots, and it sort of reached a point, and then I think sort of fell in a little bit of a hole. But I think we've gone past that point now, and I think the future potentially is fantastic for us.
Yeah, and I think things like that. That is opening up the NBL globally, like have the Next Stars program of having LaMelo Ball and having more eyeballs on the sport, and I think that doing things like the NBL being broadcast on Twitch, and people being able to watch that just puts more audience numbers there. I think there's also a lot of opportunity in that Asian market for people to be following the NBL, which gives it a lot of upside, and then the flow-on effect is, if someone's watching LaMelo Ball, someone's guarding him. There's someone scoring against him, and you don't know where the opportunity for Aussie players are going to be in that space.
Well, that's right. So I think what you're suggesting here, Sean, is we invite him down to a Tuesday morning group, and you or me might end up in the NBA. Is that what you're saying?
No, there's no chance. Although Bongo will still be talking as much rubbish as he normally does every Tuesday. That's actually a good time to wrap up. I'm here with Ned Coten. I want to get into the Sports Geek closing five. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
Yeah, look, the first event was actually an athletics carnival at my primary school in the back in Narrogin, and primary school had about 400 kids. We went down to the local footy oval. I was, I think, in grade 2. It was raining. I missed my race. I only had one race for the day, and I went crying to a teacher at about 2:30 in the afternoon, just before the tournament, the carnival was going to finish, and said, when's my race?
Yeah.
And so they reconstituted the race just for me, and then we finished, and I walked home with bare feet on a gravel pathway, crying sort of the 300 metres to my house. So that was my introduction to sporting events. It's got a bit better since then.
Yeah, exactly. Good to you for the stick-to-itiveness, for staying in the world of sport. Many people may have quit earlier than that. You would have been a few sports events in your time. Do you have a favourite food memory? I mean, the gourmet that is being stepped up year on year at different sporting events. Do you have a crazy food story or a go-to food?
I probably don't have I've actually got. I do have a not a crazy food story, but a sort of a hospitality story. I mean, it's hard to go past the beer and meat pie at the footy for me. Again, having grown up on that in the bush, that was good. But I went to an end of season gridiron, college football game in the US in Las Vegas, actually a few years ago now. And it was between Brigham Young University and Utah, two Mormon schools, and I went
part of the Mountain West.
That's right, and went to. It was a sold out crowd. We went. We bought some tickets at the last minute, and I went at half time to get a beer at the bar, and thinking I'd be lined up for 20 minutes. And of course, being Mormons, no one drank, so I just walked right up to the bar. There was not a soul in sight, and it was a great experience. So I don't know if you can call that gourmet, but it was certainly a great service.
No, that's fine. It is funny when you're going into a stadium where it is foreign to you and you don't know the rules. I did the same going to a Real Madrid game, because that's what I do when I go to the footy. I go get a beer and sit down. I grab my beer, go sit down, and the guy next to me is like, and I don't speak any Spanish. He says like going, no, what? And he goes, oh, you can't have the beer. Like you're not allowed to drink beer in the stadium while you're watching the game. And I did not know that, so I went, okay. I took my beer out, finished on the concourse, and came back to the seat to my new Spanish friend who had a beer at his seat, because he goes, well, it was good enough for you, but we did not finish any more beers. But he went, oh, well, you got away with it. I'll give it a go.
Good on him.
But yeah, it was quite funny. What's the first app you open in the morning?
There's two. I open my text messages and my phone app to see if anyone's called me.
Okay.
And so pretty basic. So I know that if something urgent's happening, generally people are going to SMS is probably my. Being sort of a slightly older generation is my go-to sort of communication piece. I'm not a massive social media user, and I've actually I'm a big believer in sort of minimalism. So doing less things better. I'm not a great. I don't execute that really well, but I'm certainly a believer in it. And so I actually don't have a lot of apps on my phone, but those that I do, I sort of use pretty regularly. But the SMS is where I go, and if I see that there's no new messages there, I think, well, okay, no disasters happen.
No crisis
I can get out of bed.
Yeah, no, exactly. Is there someone that you suggest that the podcast listeners should follow, whether it's someone you follow yourself or maybe someone you read, an author or someone like that?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. I follow. I'm a bit of a fan of Tim Ferriss. So many people would know about Tim Ferriss' 4-hour work week. Sort of time hacker, life hacker. I like a lot of his stuff. Tim Reed, Small Business Big Marketing. I know Timbo pretty well. Listen to his podcast, and he's a good guy. There's also another guy which is probably a little bit more obscure, a guy called Dan Kennedy in the US, who is sort of credited with with a big part of building the direct marketing industry, particularly in the US. Direct mail, still a proponent of snail mail, and really fascinating guy. Charges up to $20,000 a day for his consulting. Doesn't own a mobile phone. Still operates to this day by fax. And so if you want to deal with him, you have to fax him. And there's a really good rationale behind it. And I think this is interesting in this day and age. We tend to communicate just as we're thinking. So we don't sort of sit down and really think about what we're going to say. We go, it's so easy with technology to communicate something, we just spit it out. And so his rationale is really better communication as opposed to not using technology.
Yep.
And I really like that. And I think a lot of his the foundations of his work can be seen. A lot of people like Tim Ferriss and others who really communicate well and really understand what it's like to truly really engage with people and great storytelling and really being very focused on, very narrow but very deep focus.
Yep.
And I really, I really like that. I just think there's a lot to be said for that. He's someone who's a bit obscure.
Yeah, but it counters everything else. Like everything else is instant and on and on demand and those kind of things. It's like, cool, I'll just quickly tweet you, text you, and like I said, the consideration of writing something,
and we feel compelled to get straight back to someone.
Correct.
And so, I don't know, you would know the stats better than me, but if you get an SMS, it gets read within the first 2 or 3 minutes, 93 or 98% of cases. And so it's because we just can't help ourselves. We want to see the shiny object.
Yep.
And his philosophy is step back, take some time, really think, and communicate, and do really deep. Actually, that's the other one. There's a book called Deep Work by Cal Newthorpe.
Okay.
So deep work is about really focused work, and when I say focused, I mean you sit in a room with a table with nothing else, maybe with a glass of water. You don't get up for coffee. You don't go and go to the bathroom or go for a walk around the block. You work, and you do that for a period of time and really get into. Because every time even if we glance at our phone or we look around or we get up, it distracts us.
Yeah.
And so that's so the theme of minimalism, really focused effort, really thinking is what I'm aspiring to, and I've got a long way to go.
Yeah, no, I do think because it is sort of the flip of short form versus long form, right? And because everything is going shorter and shorter and shorter, like, the ideal video is now 15 seconds. No, it's 5 seconds. No, it's 3 seconds. Like, we're not goldfish, but we sort of are, because we keep getting all this content. Whereas I think the success of documentaries and that type of thing on Netflix, the success of podcasting that lets things have more time to breathe.
People want to be engaged in something interesting. So the concept of sort of a longer but well thought out message that people really engage with, because and the reason people flick is because stuff's not that interesting. It's like seen it again. It's just the same old crap that people see. And when you get something really interesting, it's like when you have a conversation, like the conversation we're having now. We're engaged in it. We're really interested. We're focused. And it's really, it's interesting, and so you want to really embrace that, and I think it's a much overlooked theme and a really overlooked skill that I think is really critical. I think it's going to get more important, not less important.
Yeah, and on the counterpiece is like, when is the last piece of like mail, like you said, snail mail? And for people who don't even know what that means, like Google it, but like really effective letter. Whether it is handwritten or whether it is form, whether it's just direct mail, it's like, because there's 150 to 200 emails you are never opening.
It's really interesting. I'm sure you've seen the cartoon where, 20 years ago we sort of had, everyone's got their mail out of their mailbox and go, oh, an email, quick, let me rush and see it. And now it's the opposite, oh, there's something in the letterbox. It's addressed to me. How exciting.
Yeah. And that's the flip, because we're just not getting a lot. And all the clutter is happening in the digital space. And so there is actually an opportunity to say, oh, I want to send this. So the last one, you did say you were minimalist and you're not tackling particular social media platforms. So what one would be your MVP?
Yeah, look, I thought a lot about this question, Sean. I think, and this is I'm kind of be not purposefully contradictory, but contradictory. Talking, the social media of actually interacting with someone and talking, I think that's really important. But in terms of a social media that I use a lot, it's probably LinkedIn.
Yep.
LinkedIn is something that I'm a business person fundamentally, and so it's about engaging. And again, you would know a lot more about this than me, but my view is that you need to find either places or communities, or in this case platforms, where there's an audience that you can connect with that has got something relevant for you, and that will accept the kind of messaging and the kind of communication that you want to put out. And for me, that's LinkedIn. I think that one of the difficulties with social media is that increasingly as the parent companies look to monetize them, and I'm a capitalist at heart, so more power
Microsoft
to them.
bought LinkedIn for a reason.
That's right. And so I think that you have to be really quite clever in the way that you communicate on those things. But I do find it useful. It is a good way to just get a snapshot of what's going on in the in the world. On the other side, one of the things that that Dan Kennedy says I was talking about before is that I don't need to look at TV or look at my phone or look at social media, because if something goes wrong, someone's going to tell me about it.
Yeah, it is a bit that way.
But look, you can't get away from it. I think that we're in a technological age. To stick your head in the sand and just say it doesn't matter is not the right response. And I do. I'm older. I'm 55, so I didn't grow up with technology. I'm not a native user. I believe that I've adapted to it. I do use it, but I would like to think that I sort of think a little bit about using it in the right way. But it's critical. I think that one of the things that we need to do as humans is connect more and talk to each other more and engage more. And social media certainly does that. It's not everybody's cup of tea, because sometimes people think, well, it's not the right way of engaging, because it's better to have a conversation.
Yeah,
but that's not always possible, and it's not always easy. And we live in a world where what those platforms do, I think there's a lot of caring people, and and I've learned a lot. I've connected with a lot of people, and I find it really, really useful. And so LinkedIn is a thing that I look at every day, and I find really valuable.
So if people want to connect and reach out and talk with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Look, because of I've got a name that's quite unique in the sense of Ned Coten, Coten. There's only one family of Cotens in Australia, and that's us. So if you just Google Ned Coten, you'll see a lot of stuff about me. You can connect. I'm always interested in talking to people about partnerships, either for basketball or I'm involved in a number of different businesses, and I enjoy connecting people. I think one of the things that I like is to be able to connect one person to another and help them to get somewhere. So I'm very open to that and very very interested in hearing from people. So if anyone wants to get in touch, they can do that. My email is ned@nedcoten.com, so a very vain email address.
That's all right.
So easy to remember. Welcome. Any interest from anyone that wants to engage in any of those topics.
Well, thanks very much, Ned. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast, and I look forward to, like everyone at Tuesday Basketball, when we're back on the court and maybe hitting a few shots.
Likewise, Sean. Look forward to it.
New workshops on audience, content, distribution, valuation, and pitch following Sports Geek's Digital to Dollars process. Go to digitaltodollars.com.
Thanks again to Ned Coten. You can connect with him, as he said, on LinkedIn or on Twitter at Ned Coten, Coten. Well, you might want to take his advice, find out his details, send him a letter. I really do love it when listeners do connect and reach out and talk to guests. So please, if you enjoyed the conversation, if it was interesting, as Ned said, please reach out, tell him that you listened, and again, if you find it interesting, please share it with others. Thank you very much to Trevor at Basketball Victoria, who did share a recent episode with the associations and shared an episode with Dino telling them about what they're doing in the space. So really do appreciate people who share it, whether you're sharing it to a big audience or you're sharing it to a friend. Every single share counts. Before I wrap up this episode, I just want to talk a little bit about Digital to Dollars training and how it can work for you and your team. I'm really excited on the few different ways that it's being developed and I guess being tweaked for different audiences and for different needs. For those of you who don't know, the process is know your audience, know your content, know your distribution, know your value, know your pitch. And the goal is it has a real strong commercial focus. The goal is for us to find more money from your partners and more value out of the digital content that you are creating. So really starting that as the focus. How can we show that you can drive more revenue from digital? But not everyone is at the point where they're ready to fully commercialize. And a lot of people say, we're not ready. We're not ready to do this. And to my counter to that is, what are you waiting for? You have to get ready. You have to start bringing in revenue. And part of the pieces of the puzzle, the key pieces, those first three, knowing your audience, knowing your content, knowing your distribution, you need to get alignment with what your digital team and content team or media team, whatever you've called them, are doing to be able to commercialize it. Because it's not until you've got those three pillars in place that you can actually get the building blocks to know what the value is of those assets and what those content pieces are, and then how to pitch it to your sponsors. So you do have to get started. And so for some clients, it is really just starting with that audience workshop. Who are you talking to, and who should you be talking to, and where is the best value for your partners, but then also where is the best value for you as a business? Who should you be talking to sell and buy more tickets? Sometimes just having that exercise provides enough value alone. It provides that tweak to go, oh, hang on, we're not actually talking to that audience correctly. Or we're producing a lot of content for a low value audience. So please, get in touch. Check out digitaltodollars.com. Send me an email. Happy to talk about whether it's a one-day workshop taking you through the 5 pillars, whether it's a one-day workshop where we deep dive on the first 3 pillars and really straighten out your digital strategy, or even just tweaking the model to look at how is it going to work for you. Again, looking at it from a real commercial focus. If I'm not making money for you from your digital assets, then we've failed. And I don't like failing. So that's very much the goal. I love it, the fact it'll train your staff and they'll know more because of it, and it will build on their skills. But what I really want to see is digital teams producing great content, engaging the fans with a commercial lens, and working better with the commercial and sponsorship team. You probably heard me say that the phrase digital divorce counsellor before. It's not a role that I want to continue. I want to start solving that problem and unlocking it. I truly do believe that digital will be the number one driver for revenue in sports by 2030. I need your help to help me make that happen. So please reach out, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. If you're not ready for something like that, please, maybe a better option is Pick My Brain. To book in a Pick My Brain session, you can simply go to sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain and book in for a 2-hour consulting session. Let's dive in on a particular content piece. Let's dive in on a particular audience. Let's dive in on a particular pitch that you're trying to do. Maybe it's a membership campaign. Maybe it's a ticketing campaign. That's an option that's available right now. It's nice and easy. 2 hours, give you some really good guidance on a few different things. And again, I have the same commercial focus, whether I'm doing a Digital Dollars program over 3 months or whether I'm doing a 2-hour Pick My Brain session. My goal is to make sure that you make the money back that you've just paid me and get a lot of value out of it. So please check it out, Sean. That is my name, and I'm just going to keep saying it. But go to sportsgeekhq.com/Sean. And this is where I leave it in for authenticity reasons. Occasionally, a podcaster after 250 odd episodes will flub a few lines. sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain. Hopefully after those flubs, you actually remember the domain. Lastly, I hope you're enjoying the new Q&A episodes. They're coming out every Friday. I'm trying to keep them under 10 minutes. Hopefully not having the flubs that I'm having in this episode. Answering 3 questions every single episode. So you can ask me anything. So if you've got a question that you want me to answer, please send them in. Send me an email, send me a tweet, message me on LinkedIn. Anyway, so questions so far have been around sponsorship, content, esports, sustainability, marketing. So send me your questions either via social or via email, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. Before I wrap up, please check out Patreon. Really appreciate everyone that has supported so far. Thanks again to Dwayne for signing up this week. sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon is where you can check that out. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Join Sports Geek Nation access to exclusive Slack and Facebook groups with regular Q&A sessions with Sean Callanan. Go to sportsgeeknation.com to join. Need help with your digital rate card? Not sure how to price your assets? Is there a disconnect between digital and commercial? That is where Sean works best, in digital divorce counselor mode. Book a time for a call with Sean to discuss the Sports Geek process. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.
Go to sportsgeekhq.com for more sports digital marketing resources.